Welcome back. Now, it's not just petroleum products that Nigerians will have to pay more for. Electricity tariff by distribution companies has also been increased. The tariff review was initially billed to take off in April, but it had to be postponed because, according to the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, about 60% of electricity consumers in the country were unmetered, or unmetered if you like, because actually they've not been metered. So the recent changes are expected to follow service-based principles. DISCOs are to consult with customers and also commit to increasing the number of hours of supply per day and quality of service. Also, there will be no tariff charge now for those consuming 50 kilowatts or less. Consumers, or customers, I should say, receiving less than 12 hours of power supply are also exempt from the change. But all the same, the issue of electricity tariff has continued to generate so much controversy in the country, despite the fact that, look, electricity in this country has actually been privatized. So everyone is talking about it. Joining me now is Dr. Eloka, who is the CEO of Century Power Generation Limited. Dr. Omer, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Are you surprised that the issue of tariff is generating this much controversy after we have privatized the power sector, especially the distribution part of it?
Earlier this decade, people thought that generation was the only problem that we had. And once we had a lot of generating capacity in the country, everything is fixed. That was a big mistake. That's not true. We have a problem across the entire value chain, all the way from fuel generation to distribution. The entire value chain is broken. And for us to fix this system, we must address each particular sector, each particular aspect of the value chain in order to get it right. Otherwise, it's going to be a little bit of the same, and we're not going to make progress.
Let's talk about this issue of tariff, because it appears a lot of people are not understanding it. People can't understand why the cost of tariff has to go up, and that the government cannot continue to subsidize. You can't continue to talk about subsidy now in an environment that has been privatized. So can you just throw more light on that?
Well, the issue of tariff has been going on for quite a while. When you ask the average Nigerian, they'll tell you that DISCOs shouldn't be raising tariff. Meanwhile, they're not providing the service that people are supposed to be paying for. So it's a little bit of chicken and egg. However, people need to understand, first of all, the power sector is not expected to provide power as a social service to individuals.
Which is what we have been used to for a long time anyway.
Right. It's not a social service, so people must pay for what they receive. That's one. Two, people need to understand energy responsibility. You walk into some places, people are not using the air conditioners in their house, and all of them are on. But if you are paying the right price for the power that you're using to run those air-conditioned units, you will turn the ones you're not using off. That's another side. And then you come to the DISCOs, the GENCOs, the fuel producers, and so on and so forth within the value chain. I say to people, we need to talk about a cost-reflective tariff. And what that simply means is this. And I'm going to stay only on power that's produced with gas turbines or gas-generated power. The person that provides the gas, that produces the gas, has to have wells that are operating. Those wells, they paid money to drill those wells. They pay money to process the gas. And that money that they used to do all this, they probably got the money from loans. They need to pay those loans back. And make a profit. Because they're not in business for their good health. They're in business to make a profit. That's on the one side. Then the gas goes through the gas pipelines. The owner of the gas pipeline needs to make a profit for people to use their gas pipelines to transport gas, okay? That is also part of the value chain. Then you get to generation. The companies that generate electricity, the GENCOs in the country, they also have to make a profit. And for them, they need to pay for building the asset. They need to pay for operating and maintaining the asset. They also need to pay the gas producer that supplied gas to them and the gas transporter that brought gas to them. They have their own tariff set. Now, for that power to get to the DISCO, they often have to pay the transmission company of Nigeria to get the power to the discos. So you see that there's a lot of money that already has to be paid by the value chain way before the power gets to the disco. And then the disco obviously has a lot of investment that they have to make or they have made. Transformers, their own distribution lines, the controls, their OPEX, and so on and so forth. And of course, they have to make a profit. So by the time you add all these things up, that brings us to the cost-reflective tariff that the end customer actually sees. And today, what a lot of people are paying is not cost-reflective. So someone is having to subsidize that. And it's probably the government. However, in the case where the government doesn't subsidize that, you're asking the discos and everyone in that value chain that I just described to make a loss. We're talking about business. People are in business to make a profit. So if these people in the value chain are to pass on the costs to produce and deliver the power, a certain number is what has to be charged to the end user. And that is what the cost-reflective tariff is. And today in Nigeria, we're not doing that. And that's part of the reason why the sector is not working.
So we can essentially say that, look, we can actually solve our power problem once and for all if only we're ready to pay for it.
That is correct. And so let's take Lagos, where we live and work, for example. There are some estates in Lagos where the residents in those estates get power, reliable power, for at least 22 hours of a day, every day of the week. Okay?
Absolutely.
Those people pay higher, their tariff is higher than what the grid power is today. Some places they pay 60 naira per kilowatt hour. Some places they pay up to and slightly above 70 naira per kilowatt hour for them to get this reliable power. The same thing will apply to grid power. If everyone in the value chain on the grid charges what they're supposed to charge, this power will be reliable in the country. And I say to folks, the government did the right thing. They privatized the power sector. But the privatization is not complete yet. The government owns 40% of the discos. Private companies own 60%. Even the GENCOs that were privatized, the government owns about 40% of the whole discos, on-grid power generating plants today in the country. Private sector owns 60% of them. The government owns the entire transmission company of Nigeria. So we say that privatization has been done. Yes, it has been done to an extent. It's not completely done. And I keep saying and I keep insisting, and I'm yet to see someone tell me otherwise. For us to get the power sector right in this country, the privatization has to be completed completely, which means all those assets should go into the hands of private sector. And there should be a willing buyer, willing seller type agreement between the different aspects of the value.
But how do you explain
the
this
gas
now?
supply needs to charge what they need. Go ahead, please.
But how do you explain, because this is something we'll often hear, and I believe you've heard that several times over, that look, after the privatization, a lot of people thought, it was going to be a new beginning altogether, a completely new experience. We were going to have at least, say, 20 hours of power supply and what have you. But the prevailing situation in the country today is that even when some people are paying more and, even when power has been privatized, we're still not getting, or they're still not getting the desired or adequate power supply as they had expected the privatization process was going to bring about.
Yeah. So I said it during the privatization. A lot of people, just like you said, had the misconception that once the government said we've privatized, people would immediately have 24/7 power, reliable power every day. And that's wrong. Everything is a process. Let's start with generating plants, for example. It takes about 3 years or thereabouts to build a big base load generating plant anywhere. If you're fast, you can build it in 2 years. Okay? Now, that is just the construction part. But you have to raise the money to build. So those plants that were sold in the country, some of them have issues. Some of them have technical problems. Some have gas problems. Some have transmission problems. All these things take a while to fix. Then you look at the discos. There's something that people may remember, ATC&C, Aggregated Technical Collection and Commercial Losses, right? Those losses mean that, and if you break it down in simple terms, if, for example, a GENCO supplies 100 megawatts of power through TCN to a DISCO, because of technical losses, the DISCO may end up receiving maybe 90 megawatts of power. But then by the time they try to distribute that power, they will only be able to really get a fraction of that power to the end users. There's theft. There are a lot of users today that don't have meters. There's some that have meters that are not working. So at the end of the day, that DISCO is able to collect maybe about 30% of the money from the power that was sold. So they may be able to get money for only 30 megawatts of power. Meanwhile, what was sent out was 100 megawatts. So think about this. For us to fix that problem, it's going to take several years for us to start seeing this working. However, because we haven't completed the privatization, we're continuing to have hiccups along the line. Let me put it in simple terms. Assuming a patient goes to a doctor, and the doctor determines you have an infection, and the doctor prescribes an antibiotic to the patient. The antibiotic typically takes 5 to 7 days to work. After the first day, the patient comes back and says, I'm not seeing any change. And the doctor, rather than telling the patient, you need to wait for 7 days for this thing to take effect, they change the medication. They give him another antibiotic. So you've already wasted the course, or you've broken the course of the first antibiotic that was given to you. You started a different one that should take another 7 days to work. 2 days later, he comes back, well, I'm not really seeing any difference. They give you another one. That is what we're really dealing with in Nigeria. We've come up with a set of regulations, and we keep changing those regulations. And because we keep changing, it's almost like we keep resetting. We take one step forward in the sector, and we take maybe 1 or 2 steps backward. The government's heart is in the right place. They're trying to do the right thing. However, I'm saying that for the sector to work, we need to liberalize that sector. We need to completely complete the privatization and then put those policies in place that would help the sector to grow and then regulate it. This is what was done in telecoms. Today, telecoms may not be fantastic, but it's working. Many people in this country today have phones that are working. You find a lot of people, even the people that you consider poor, some of them have 2 phones. And they pay for the service they use. There's no argument whether the tariff is cost reflective or whether it's not. People just pay for their credit. And they use only what they can afford. That is the way it should work in the power sector. Okay, and that is the only way to get this working.
All right, let's quickly take a short break. I'll come back to you. I want to find out from you why it's been difficult to meter every consumer in this country. And then in the whole issue of this privatization process and the issue of cost-reflective tariff, how do you factor in the poor? So we'll take a short break and we'll be right back. On DEJI360, we don't just ask the questions. What is wrong with amending the Constitution the way the National Assembly members have been doing it? We seek answers.
Constitution is constituent. Our problem is not lack of laws. Our problem is lack of the willpower to implement our laws.
Answers that provide clarity.
While we negotiate, we should try to make it a point that the girls must be complete.
The clarity you need to make informed judgment so that you can make the right decision and take action. People are saying it is you politicians that are responsible for this, that you are the reason why this is happening.
All these dollars that call themselves governors in this country?
I wish we had people like Tony at the National Assembly.
God forbid that I go to join that band.
DEJI360, providing clarity to issues. All right, welcome back. And if you've just joined us, you're watching DEJI360, and we're discussing the issue of the electricity tariff hike in the country. And I have Dr. Eloka Ume, who's the CEO of Century Power Generation Company Limited. Dr. Ume, thank you very much for continuing to stay with us. Let's talk about the issue of metering. Why, in your opinion, has it been difficult for the DISCOs to meter everyone, every electricity consumer in this country?
Thank you for that question. You know, the metering issue has been going on for several years, and the government has tried several things to help, including the MAP program that they started. Lagos State is starting one of their own, and This is all geared towards getting meters to every home, every factory, every office, every off-taker really that can consume power. Now, think about this. We want the discos to meter their off-takers. First of all, who are the off-takers? We don't even have all the potential off-takers registered. We don't know how many people are going to potentially use power. That's one. Set it aside. On the second part, the discos, according to the regulation, are limited in the amount of money they can spend each year to upgrade their discos or their networks. And that investment is not just limited to metering. It's also limited. It also includes upgrading the transmission or their distribution assets.
Why are they limited in their spend?
This is one of the things that came out of NERC, and that's a whole other topic. I mean, we can spend a lot of time in that topic, but let's take it on the face value for now. That's one regulation from NERC. Now, for every customer to be metered is very doable. It can actually be done very quickly. But that takes significant investment. The investment is out there. The money is out there to get this done. However, they need to be able to pay back the money for this investment. And paying back this money for investment goes back to the tariff. Okay? If the tariff is enough to pay for all the investment, people will get meters. If the discos are able to charge a cost-reflective tariff, they will be incentivized. They will be motivated to meter every customer. But because there's theft, because the investment is not being made to upgrade all their equipment, what's the incentive for them to meter everybody? There are people who want to pay for the power that they receive. The people exist. But the incentive for the discos to do that is not completely there. So now we're finding the government is having to step in to help with some of these programs like the MAP. But again, it's not going to do the trick at the end of the day. It's going to take a long time to achieve doing it the way we're doing it now. And it takes us back to square zero, which means let the disco make this investment, meter everybody, upgrade your equipment, upgrade your infrastructure, and charge a cost-reflective tariff, and you'll see meters across the entire country.
Yeah, because the reason I asked you
same thing that's happened.
The reason I asked you this is because, I mean, you did earlier, you talked about some parts of Lagos where they have, well, what they call the premium power agreement now with the discos. And I have experienced that. And I know when this premium power thing was going to be started in a particular location, I know that everybody living in that location, everybody was metered without waste of time before the start of the premium power agreement. So I'm just surprised that it's difficult. You know, I was surprised to see that actually metering could be done in that case. So it's difficult to understand why metering cannot be done across board for everyone in this country, because people often complain that the challenge they have is not because they do not want to pay, but that they want to be charged for what they use.
Yes, which is very fair. And I'm glad you used the example of those premium customers or those premium areas where the people were metered. It was done because it's a pure willing buyer, willing seller type agreement. The person selling that power there obviously wants to be able to account for every watt of power going out. And the only way they can account for it is by metering. The person receiving the power wants to pay for only what they use, and they can only do that with metering. Now, the price has been agreed between the provider and the off-taker. So if you take that same model and apply it across the entire country and allow the disco to deal directly with the off-takers, you see that the incentive for the disco to meter the people is there, because they will be able to account for every watt of power that they send out and account for how much they receive back. And if they're not getting this money back, they know who to cut off because that person is not paying. However, the regulations need to be relaxed enough to allow the discos to do this. It needs to be relaxed enough to allow the GENCO to charge what they need to charge. Today, we're talking about competitive bidding. So if someone wants to build a GENCO, then maybe we need to start doing a competitive bid to see who gives the lowest price. Why are we doing that? This is something that should come way down the line, many years down the line, when we have a saturation of power in the country. We're not there. We should let anyone that can generate power generate and just send it out. At whatever price that they can, it is up to the off-taker to take what they want to pay for, what they can pay for. If you don't want to pay for it, then you use your diesel generator like you're doing today. Oh, by the way, a lot of private people don't even know that what they're paying using the diesel generators is much higher. People pay over 100 naira per kilowatt hour for the power they generate using their own diesel generators with the attendant hassles, with attendant pollution, but they don't realize this. So we need to get information out to people. The government needs to help. The government, again, wants to do the right thing. And I'm encouraging them to complete what they started, complete the privatization, and then relax the regulations enough. Yes, you care about the poor people who may not be able to afford the power.
Now, how do you,
In
and that poor people, that's my last
The
question for you.
government can subsidize those people.
How do you deal with these poor people in the face of this privatization? Because that appears to be the sticking point. What would you suggest?
So, poor people, that term is very relative in my own mind. And I say it's relative because think about this. If a poor person has access to 24/7 power and they live in maybe a one-bedroom apartment or one-bedroom home, but they want to start a small business, maybe selling frozen fish, that poor person can have a low wattage bulb in their house, maybe a 15-watt bulb in their house to provide lighting, but then they are able to buy and run a freezer. And running that freezer means they can buy fish when it's frozen, keep it frozen, and they can sell fish. So they're able to generate money to both buy power and feed their family. You understand? But because they're not able to do that today, they remain poor. So people can't even start small businesses or tiny businesses anymore because they don't have power. Now, if the government wants to help people like that, they can subsidize the power that those people get. We have a system in which several different categories of tariffs will be charged to several different categories of people, depending on how much load they consume, depending on how much they can afford. And the government has a registry for some of these people. This is a system that can work. Those poor people can be catered to. I mean, think about it. Again, I go back to cell phones. Those people that you call poor use cell phones today. That's where flashing comes in. You won't find a poor person sitting on the phone for 1 hour, having a chat, and in irrelevant conversation, when they can have that conversation for 30 seconds and they get the message across. The same applies to the power sector. So again, we're not actually helping those people by making all these regulations we're making, because they're not able to get the power that they need to get a livelihood. So again, it's a chicken and egg thing. Which one should come first? And I say privatize, finish privatization, relax regulations, let the power sector grow organically, and then regulate it. And the country stands to make a lot of money from this sector. And people stand to make a lot of money from what they can do with steady power.
Dr. Eloka, thank you very much for your contributions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you too as well. We'll take a short break now, and when we come back, we'll continue the discussion on this issue of the hike in electricity tariff. Stay with us. On DEJI360, we don't just ask the questions. What is wrong with amending the Constitution the way the National Assembly members have been doing it? We seek answers.
Constitution is constituent. Our problem is not lack of laws. Our problem is lack of the willpower to implement our laws.
Answers that provide clarity.
While we negotiate, we should try to make it a point that the girls must be complete.
The clarity you need to make informed judgment so that you can make the right decision and take action. People are saying it is you politicians that are responsible for this, that you are the reason why this is happening.
All these dollars that call themselves governors in this country.
I wish we had people like Tony at the National Assembly.
God forbid that I go to join that band
DEJI360, providing clarity to issues.